For over 30 years, there has been one franchise that has captured the hearts and imaginations of children all over the world. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to look into a franchise that helped change the way an entire generation viewed reading.
They called me a literary training bra for Stephen King.
It inspired TV shows, movies, video games, stage shows, and even a musical. And in honor of the new series premiering on my birthday, we're going to look into 10 things you might not know about Goosebumps.
Goosebumps. Viewer beware, you're in for a scare.
Number 10. Jovial Bob Stine didn't want to do Goosebumps. As far back as he could remember, little Bobby Stine wanted to be a cartoonist. He loved coming up with funny drawings and writing funny jokes, but there was one problem.
And I would show mine around and everyone would say, "You're terrible, you're awful, you can't draw."
So not to be deterred, he ended up writing his own joke magazine and started bringing it to school. He got so persistent that even his teachers started telling him to stop.
I always thought if they hadn't told me to stop, I might have stopped.
While at Ohio State, he met his future wife and business partner, Jane Waldhorn. After graduating, they both got jobs in New York, editing at Scholastic. It was there Jane got put in charge of a magazine called Dynamite.
Kids loved it, and her magazine was so successful that they let me do one.
So Jovial Bob got to live out his childhood dream, to write and put out a magazine called Bananas. From what I understand, it was a lot like Mad Magazine and National Lampoon's magazine.
When that ended, I figured I would just coast for the rest of my career. I would just coast. That was it. I'd already done what I wanted to do.
He continued to publish books like How to Be Funny and 101 Creepy Creature Jokes, as well as adapting Spaceballs the Book, the Big Top Pee-wee Movie Storybook, and Ghostbusters 2 Storybook. So how did he get into writing terror?
And I had lunch with the editorial director of Scholastic one day. She needed someone to write a scary novel for teenagers. She said, "You could do it. Go home and write a scary novel for teenagers called Blind Date." It was a #1 bestseller.
Fast forward to 1992. Stine is doing incredibly well killing off teenagers with the Fear Street novels for Simon & Schuster, even putting out one a month.
And my wife and her business partner, they have a company called Parachute Press. And they said, "We have to try a horror series for 7 to 12-year-olds. No one has ever done it before." And I said, "No way. I don't want to screw up Fear Street." And I refused to do it. They kept after me and said, "No, we have to try it." And then finally I said, "All right, if I can think of a good name for the series, we can try 2 or 3. One day I'm reading TV Guide, and there's a little ad at the bottom of the page said it's Goosebumps Week on Channel 11. And I just stared at it. I knew it was perfect. Channel 11. That's a horrible joke, but that's where the name came from.
Number 9. Artist Tim Jacobus couldn't read the Goosebump books he was painting. For me and many other kids, I believe we were drawn to the covers. I remember the bright colors and the photorealistic creepy images drew me to the books when I was a kid. This was the work of the artist Tim Jacobus, who painted all the original Goosebump covers except for 2. And the only reason he missed Be Careful What You Wish For was because he was going on an anniversary trip with his wife and the schedule was too tight for them to wait.
I would be writing the book at the same time he'd be doing the cover painting.
And so he never got to actually read the Goosebump books while he was painting the covers.
I'd be writing the book, and I'd send him the title and just a paragraph, and then he would do a cover based on that little paragraph.
Amazingly enough, Tim Jacobus and R.L. Stine worked together on Goosebumps for 4 years before they ever actually met. One of the things that kept him in sync with the stories was the fact that he worked with the editors, and he usually compiles 3 sketches that he sends to them to choose and approve before he actually does the full painting. He says it takes him about a week to finish a completed cover once the sketches are approved. He also said that the tight schedule gave him a lot more freedom to create artwork.
In all the covers, he only missed once and sent in a cover painting that wasn't appropriate.
They would wait till I got finished with the art, and then they would ship it over to him, and he would see the actual painting.
It was Say Cheese and Die, about some kids who find a camera, takes pictures of bad things that happen a short while in the future. And Tim sent in this cover, which is a family of skeletons barbecuing. It has nothing to do with the book. And the editors called me up and they said, Bob, could you put in a scene with some skeletons barbecuing? Because it's too late to change the painting. You can't change the painting, right?
So R.L. Stine fell back with the old writing standard and created a dream sequence.
The boy goes to sleep and he dreams about a family of skeletons barbecuing. And then the cover made sense.
For the longest time, it was one of my favorite pieces, and I thought I did such a good job of it. And now, when I'm out with Bob, it's one of the stories he tells where it's the ones that he likes the least. And I was like, ah.
Number 8. R.L. Stine had to write at least 2 books every month. The kids were hooked, which means there was a demand for more Goosebumps books. He had originally started the series putting a book out every 2 months, which quickly became a book a month. Now keep in mind, he still had to write at least 1 Fear Street novel, as well as the occasional Goosebumps spin-off.
I had to write 2 novels a month.
So how does he do it all?
I don't know. I didn't get out much. I'd been writing for 20 years, and no one had noticed. I think the exhilaration of having this sudden success, it was so exciting. I think that's what kept me going.
According to Bob, it only takes him about 10 days to complete a first draft of his books. And like B-Monster Movie Studios back in the 50s, he comes up with a gripping title first.
I was walking my dog in Riverside Park, and these words flashed into my mind. Little Shop of Hamsters. How do I make hamsters scary? That's a challenge, right? Do I do 1,000 hamsters or 1 giant hamster? And you start thinking of it like that, and then the idea develops. But I always just start with titles now.
He usually begins with the surprise ending and then works his way backwards.
Every story ever told can be broken down into 3 distinct parts. The beginning, the middle, and the twist.
Next, he creates a detailed outline and presents it to his editor, which he says is his least favorite part. Sometimes he has to send many versions before they'll approve it.
And I will tell you that it's a nightmare.
Oh, and did I mention that his editor is his wife, Jane?
How would you like to be married to your editor? It's unbelievable. That's about the only thing we fight about, plots.
And he says she doesn't let him get away with anything.
So I handed in a book once, and the manuscript came back with 2 words on the front, and that's all. It said, psychotic ramblings. That was it.
Harsh. Of course, at the height of the franchise, when they had multiple series running, they had to admit that he did hire a few ghostwriters to help him translate his ideas into plot outlines. That way they can focus on getting it approved by his wife, and he can focus on the part he likes the most, the writing. He says he typically sits down around 9 or 10 and doesn't leave until he writes 2,000 words, and he'll typically reread and edit what he had written the day before. To date, there has been 10 different Goosebumps series. There was the original Goosebumps, Tales to Give You Goosebumps, Give Yourself Goosebumps, Goosebumps Presents, Goosebumps Triple Header, Goosebumps Series 2000, Goosebumps Horrorland, Goosebumps Hall of Horrors, Goosebumps Most Wanted, and for the 25th anniversary of Goosebumps, he launched Goosebumps Slappy's World. Even though he did have assistants on the outlines in the game books, he still insists that he wrote every single actual Goosebump book. Number 7. Hollywood Horrorland. With such universal success, it was only a matter of time before executives wanted to jump on the bandwagon. Now, everyone's timeline of when everything happened is a little different from each other, but according to R.L. Stine, there had been talks about making a Goosebumps movie all the way back to 1994, including a signed deal with Fox, with none other than Tim Burton to produce with an option to direct.
And Tim Burton was assigned to it. He was supposed to produce the film. It was going to be Tim Burton's Goosebumps movie.
But how do you go about adapting a book series with what would end up being 62 different stories?
They spent a long time trying to figure out which book should we do, which book would make a full-length movie. And they didn't like anything they came up with.
Even though it was a time that Tim Burton was at his most creative and most successful, it wasn't a great time for projects that he was developing. For instance, his adaptation of The Hawkeye Monster with Clint Eastwood and Jack Nicholson fell through. Same with his adaptation of Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher. And Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian. Sadly, he ended up leaving Goosebumps to work on the infamous Superman Lives.
And we went out and had a big meeting and talked with Tim, what should we do, and a big meeting, and everyone was happy. And then he got involved with some kind of Superman project.
Which ironically got canceled a mere 3 weeks before it was supposed to start filming.
Doing Superman and forgot about Goosebumps, and it never happened.
Sadly, we never got a Tim Burton Goosebump movie, but it's still kind of fun to imagine what it would be like. But the one thing we know for sure was Danny Elfman was going to do the music. Oh wait, Danny Elfman did do the music in the 2015 movie, so I guess that's one thing that stayed the same. Of course, it has come out that George A. Romero was also interested and considered to direct a movie. In the University of Pittsburgh Library, in 2021, they discovered a screenplay written by George A. Romero for Welcome to the Deadhouse, as well as a letter to Fox in 1995 that stated that he was under consideration for the Goosebumps project. The script was roughly 124 pages and was dated in 1996. Now, he did make a few changes from the book. For instance, he changed the ghouls into zombies. Also, it wasn't the house turning people into zombies, it was the result of an accident at a factory. Now, interestingly enough, when the Goosebumps series made an adaptation of Welcome to Deadhouse, they did end up changing it to a factory accident that made a town full of zombies. So in an indirect way, George A. Romero may have influenced the Goosebumps television special. Number 6. Viewers beware, you're in for a scare. After the Goosebumps movie deal fell through, the most logical step for Goosebumps was to be a television series. After all, various networks had success with shows like Are You Afraid of the Dark?, Eerie, Indiana, Tales from the Crypt Keeper, and various other supernatural-themed shows geared towards children. Margaret Loesch, who was the head of Fox Kids at the time, had her eye on adapting Goosebumps to the small screen. So to test it out, she got her young son a copy of Goosebumps to test it out, and when she saw how much he loved it, she immediately greenlit the project. And on October 27th, 1995, R.L. Stine's reported favorite Goosebump book, The Haunted Mask, debuted as a primetime special on Fox's Halloween Bash. And in a life coming around full circle moment, Fox's Halloween Bash was hosted by none other than the Crypt Keeper, the host of the television adaptation of Tales from the Crypt, which was the comic book that most inspired R.L. Stine to write Goosebumps.
Good evening, kiddies. Tonight we'll drink a little terror with your favorite Fox stars from Universal Studios, Florida. But first, a special presentation sure to give you goosebumps.
The debut was a success. Reaching nearly 8 million homes, The Haunted Mask has gone down as one of the most celebrated primetime Halloween specials in history. It successfully launched the Goosebumps series, which would begin airing on Fox Kids, where it would be the #1 rated children's program in the U.S. for 4 years straight. It has been translated in over 100 countries, won several awards, including winning a Gemini Award for actress Catherine Long for her performance in The Haunted Mask. Now, I won't go into too much detail, because like the movie, I believe this series deserves its own episode somewhere down the line. But I will say that the Canadian series had been the starting ground for many future stars. For instance, before he started beaching people off, Ryan Gosling was in Say Cheese or Die. See young Anakin Skywalker cower before Slappy the Dummy. Also, Criminal Minds' A.J. Cook, and Grey's Anatomy's Katarina Skorson. Also, Ginger Snap's Catherine Isabel before she became a werewolf. It was a fun show. It was cheap, and it was just a little bit cheesy, but it's everything you want a Goosebumps series to be. Number 5. Jeff Goldblum, the Vampire. The Goosebump craze was booming, and everybody wanted to get into the act. There was official Goosebumps fan clubs. There were toys, games, puzzles, pogs, corporate tie-ins into Pizza Hut, KFC.
Merchandising! Where the real money from the movie is made.
Goosebumps also caught the eye of none other than Steven Spielberg.
Goosebumps was the first time I think that my kids wanted to read to me.
Of course, a movie was already in development, but he still wanted to make something of this property for his kids. Now, Steven had ended up taking a break from directing after directing Jurassic Park and Schindler's List the same year, and his focus shifted more to developing DreamWorks with Jeffrey Katzenberg and David Geffen. They had also teamed up with Bill Gates to develop DreamWorks Interactive, and the first property they had their eyes set on was Goosebumps. And after teaming up with Goosebumps, they released Escape from Horrorland, which served as a sequel to the book One Day at Horrorland, which is still regarded as a fun and unique gaming experience. Of course, the game is most remembered for the unexpected and bizarre appearance of Jeff Goldblum as Count Dracula.
I'm Dracul. And I think it's a good story, and we have really good actors.
The game also has appearances from Isabella Rossellini, Eric Lloyd from the Santa Claus movies, and wait, is that Judy Tenuta?
Did you know that werewolf spelled backwards is well, now you do.
Okay, my dad is really up on old comedians. All you need to know is she's been nominated for 2 Grammys for comedy albums and won Best Female Stand-Up Comic at the American Comedy Awards. I just think it's kind of amusing that Steven Spielberg and Jeff Goldblum worked with the writer of Party in Your Pants. The game starts with Lizzie from the original book telling us that strange things are happening in our house and her brother Luke and his friend Clay have disappeared.
What? Don't you believe me?
Suddenly, we get catapulted into Horrorland. First thing we do is look around and find and rescue Luke and Clay.
Just get us out of here!
And we're left to explore this strange new world, looking for clues and solving puzzles. We fight a mummy and a werewolf. We rescue a scarecrow that looks a lot like Michael Jackson from The Wiz. And as we ease on down the road, we finally meet up with Count Jeffula. There's a bizarre segment where you dance with Count Dracula and try to pick his pocket while you're dancing.
You got to pick a pocket or two.
Again, it's a bizarre game, but still fun. They even created 2 endings, depending on whether you succeed or not. The game did go on to win a couple of awards, and was the highest grossing game DreamWorks had put out at the time. It also paved way for other Goosebumps video games, like DreamWorks' successful follow-up, Attack of the Mutant, which featured the voices of Jim Belushi and Batman's Adam West.
Don't you know you have to help me save the world?
Goosebumps went on to have a long, successful history of games, but it all started in 1996 with Escape from Horrorland. Number 4, the PTA walks at midnight. Now, R.L. Stine has set up his own rules about his Goosebump books.
No one ever dies. There are no guns. If there's a ghost, it happened a long time before the story started.
Basically, he removes reality from his books, making sure that children know that this couldn't actually happen in real life. So with no violence, sensuality, guns, gore,
And death.
or any realistic dangers, so there certainly isn't anything to object to, right? Right?
Satan is giving your children unnatural, irrational, ungodly goosebumps.
Yes, whenever children find something that makes them happy and actually interested in reading, there's always groups of adults trying to take that away from them.
I'm just amazed and appalled that the only way it seems that the majority of you people can get your children to read books is by reading this type of garbage.
Ironically, the same thing happened to the EC Comics back in the 50s, which had Congress hearings that eventually put an end to the EC Comics horror line.
We try to influence nonviolence on our children, yet we allow books that glorify violence and gore and somehow becomes appealing to our children.
It's obvious these people never actually read the books, but these kids were the first to defend it.
I think Goosebumps are good books because R.L. Stine puts a lot of work into them and makes them fun.
I myself don't care for Goosebump books, but I don't think it's right to ban the books from our media center. It is my choice and my parents as to what I read or don't read. This is a free country, and I think we should be able to make our own choices. Our liberty depends on the freedom of the press, and that cannot be limited without being lost. All the 10, 11, and 12-year-olds mainly read these books, and they know that it is just make-believe, and to us, it is not frightening nor scary. I have these signatures to all the people who totally agree with me.
Goosebumps wound up being the 15th most challenged book in the ALA's most challenged books of the 90s. To give you an idea of how ridiculous this was, Howard Stern's book, Private Parts, was only rated number 86. The Anarchist's Cookbook was number 59. Even Madonna's infamous sex book, with a barrage of illicit imagery, only rated number 18, making Goosebumps more challenged than Madonna's sex book. Of course, Scholastic's title, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, ranked number 1, but that's a franchise for another video. Anyways, the kids pushed back and they got to keep Goosebumps. People ask, how do we get our kids to read? You give children something they actually want to read, and then you don't take it away from them. Number 3, the death of Goosebumps. Now, Goosebumps has dealt with a lot of haters from the beginning, but a different battle had started that helped to derail Goosebumps. Parachute Press and Scholastic began a long legal battle back and forth. In the end, both companies worked together to produce Goosebumps. So who owned the books? Who owned the merchandising? Who owned the iconic G? That's right. If you notice, the newer Goosebumps books have a different letter G. The iconic G has since been retired. In the end, the sales had dropped and they were both blaming each other for it. Now, the whole business between Scholastic and Parachute Press got a little bit sticky with them suing each other back and forth. But ultimately, Scholastic wasn't going to let their most profitable series go, right? Right? Well, on September 1st in 1998, Scholastic released what would eventually dethrone Goosebumps and become the highest-grossing book series of all time. 1998, the TV series would air its last episode, and various projects, including Goosebump Gold, were canceled. Scholastic chose not to renew Stine's contract. Kids have found a new favorite, and Harry Potter's success killed Goosebumps. Stephen King has actually gone on to credit Goosebumps for Harry Potter's success. Goosebumps had done what no other books had done before. It managed to make children interested in reading again, and it paved way for Harry Potter. Number 2, how the franchise rose from the grave. With Goosebumps ended, R.L. Stine went to work writing The Nightmare Hour and The Haunting Hour, and a slew of other spooky projects for children. But he was still hoping to do more Goosebumps. After several years of litigation, Scholastic reached a settlement, paying Parachute Press nearly $10 million for the rights to Goosebumps. R.L. Stine wanted to write more books, but it had been a few years, and Scholastic wanted to test the market first.
And a teacher came up to the table, and she said, "Can I have my picture taken with you? The kids all think you're dead."
So in 2003, they re-released the classic Goosebump books with a new design layout, but still kept the original artwork. In 2006, Scholastic played with releasing a couple graphic novels. Then in 2007, Scholastic released Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, the final book in the Harry Potter series. With the end of their most successful franchise, they decided it was time to revisit their second most successful franchise. Then in 2007, for Halloween, Cartoon Network aired its first fully live-action program, a marathon of the Goosebump TV show. It was so successful they ended up running it for 3 years straight. Then fans got even more exciting news on the website. Without much warning, R.L. Stine released the first chapter of Revenge of the Living Dummy. It was the first new material in over 8 years. Soon, Scholastic released the new Goosebump Horrorland series. It was originally a 12-book deal, but it proved to be so successful that Scholastic extended the contract. Of course, the success of the new Horrorland series brought DVD releases of the classic episodes, more Goosebump series and video games, leading to the redevelopment of something that fans thought would never come. Number 1, Return of the Living Icon. In 2008, Columbia acquired the rights to create a Goosebump film. Now, this has been a halted production for quite some time. They chose to bring back Deborah Forte, who produced the Goosebump television series, and they had brought on Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski, who previously collaborated with Tim Burton on Ed Wood and would go on to collaborate on Big Eyes. It was the duo who decided against adapting a single book and decided to come up with a way to create a universe where all the characters can live together. They were the ones that decided to create a fictitious biography for R.L. Stine.
It's so weird. What a weird thing to be a character in a movie.
And of course, resurrecting Slappy the Dummy to be the main antagonist. They wrote the original screenplay that became the foundation for the movie.
I asked my son Matt, I said, "Who do you think should play me in the Goosebumps film?" He said, "Morgan Freeman."
Of course, it took about 17 drafts and several other writers before they finally had a script that was approved. And in November of 2012, Stine expressed pessimism about whether the project would actually come to be. He pretty much figured, I'll believe it when I see it at this point.
I went to my wife, Jane, and I said, "Jane, a lot of people think I should play myself in the Goosebumps movie." And she said, "You're too old to play yourself."
Shortly after, it was reported that Jack Black was in talks to play R.L. Stine.
Viewer beware, you're in for a scare.
Now, like the TV series, I believe the movie deserves its own episode somewhere down the line, so I won't go into too much detail. But the previews for the film were so successful that the sequel was greenlit before the movie even premiered. And on October 16th, 2015, Goosebumps the movie was number 1 at the box office and received positive reviews. But its popularity led to more books, more games, and even a stage musical, which is an adaptation of The Phantom of the Auditorium, which premiered in 2016. And of course, the new 2023 Goosebumps TV series, which is being spearheaded by Rob Letterman, who directed the first Goosebump movie.
Why does James smell like watermelon Jolly Ranchers?
I was just gonna say.
And it premiered on my birthday. Well, that's my 10 things you don't know about Goosebumps, a franchise that increased the reading level of an entire generation. It also paved way for Harry Potter, so much that Stephen King himself actually compared Goosebumps to John the Baptist. It has sold over 400 million copies and has produced many successful games, movies, and television series and is still going strong. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons, and until I see you again, pleasant screams.